Spitting in his face was her biggest mistake. His silent revenge left her breathless. He wasn't supposed to survive. She wasn't supposed to care. In the fading light of the twin suns over the frozen moons of Varlin, smoke curled from the remains of a Terran fighter ship. It had come in fast, broken, and on fire. Then it slammed into the glacier fields like a dying comet. The crash had lit up the skies over the sanctuary, a place where no outsider was allowed to set foot, let alone crash land. Lady Alis of the Alari was the first to arrive. She stood silently at the edge of the crater, her long silver-white robes barely stirring in the icy wind. Her people were tall, graceful, and distant, famous for psychic calm and skin so cold it could burn. They felt little and touched less. Emotion was weakness. Warmth was danger, and humans, they were loud, crude, short-lived animals. And yet, there he was, sprawled across a makeshift fire made from pieces of his ship and stripped wires. A human male, shirtless, bloodied, half frozen, but breathing. Somehow, this savage had survived a fall that would have liquefied an Alar. His chest rose and fell slowly, steadily, steam curling off his skin in the bitter air. His hands were burned. His knuckles were bruised. His jaw was square, dusted. With stubble, and despite everything, he looked peaceful. She stepped closer. Alis knelt beside him, her pale fingers hovering above his neck. One touch. Just one psychic scan to confirm life signs. Her fingertips grazed his throat. That was her first mistake. The moment she touched him, something unexpected surged through her. Pulse. Heat. Not just body warmths. Something deeper, primal. Human minds weren't like Alari minds. His thoughts didn't float. They roared. They were full of fire and chaos and color. His body, too, radiated something strange, a force that called to her in ways no Ilari male ever had. She pulled back, like she'd been stung. What was this sensation? Why did her heart, usually slow and still, suddenly beat like she was in battle? Her breath came faster. She could feel her psychic barriers weakening, shifting toward him like metal to a magnet, and then his eyes opened. Bright, sharp, blue. He looked at her without fear, without flinching. His lips cracked into a lopsided smile. "Well," he rasped, voice dry as dust. "You're either here to save me or finish the job. Either way, I'm too tired to fight." Alis stared at him, speechless. He was dying and joking. That was her second mistake. Not out loud, of course, but a small breath, a curve of her lips. For an Ilari, that was a scandal. "I am Lady Alis," she said finally, her voice cool and clear. "You are trespassing on sacred ground?" He smirked. "Trust me, wasn't my plan." He passed out again, but the damage was done. Something inside her had shifted. She should have called the guards. She should have reported the intruder and let protocol erase him. But instead, she built a sled out of hull plating and dragged his heavy human body through snow and wind back to her hidden quarters beneath the sanctuary. There. She placed him by her hearth, a luxury only high-ranking Ailari enjoyed and watched. The firelight play across his strange, rugged form. He healed faster than expected. His skin was thick, his muscles dense. His body temperature stayed high, even in the cold. And his size, well, it wasn't just his muscles that were larger than expected, strictly for scientific observation. Of course, when she began scanning him, his body reacted in unexpected ways. Muscles tensed under her touch. His breathing deepened. She should have stopped. She didn't. One night, while tending to his bandaged side, her hand brushed his lower abdomen, and his body responded, strongly. "So, you're awake," she murmured without looking up. "I was," he said with a hoarse chuckle. "But then you touched me like that, and now I might be dreaming." She should have frozen him out. Instead, she smirked. "My people do not touch like that," she said. "Then maybe your people are missing out," he replied. Alis found herself, drawn to him more and more. He was unpredictable, undisciplined, but real. He wasn't like the emotionless males of her kind. Challenged her, flirted with her, protected her when the shelter nearly collapsed from a snowquake, throwing himself. over her body without hesitation. When she asked him why later, he shrugged. Looked like you needed a hero. I've been alive for 100 years, she said. Yeah, and you finally got lucky. He grinned. She hated how warm her cheeks felt. Each day, their closeness grew. Each night, their silences grew shorter, till one moment beneath the flickering firelight, she looked at him too long, and he reached up to brush a lock of her white hair away from her eyes. His fingers lingered. You're not cold, he said softly. Only on the outside. She whispered, and when he kissed her tentative, but hungry, she didn't stop him. That was her third mistake, and the beginning of everything else. Asterisk, the fire had burned low, casting flickering gold across the rough stone walls of the hidden chamber. Outside, the Varlin wind howled like some ancient god warning her to turn back. But inside, everything was still except her. Lady Alis sat across from the human, her legs folded beneath her, arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if hugging herself could stop what was happening inside. She wasn't supposed to feel anything. Not warmth, not want, definitely not this. Marcus Caneron, fighter pilot, rule-breaker, heat-bringer, was stretched out near the hearth, not asleep, not quite awake, just watching her. His eyes were sharp again, not dazed, weak, and very, very aware of her. She noticed he hadn't put his shirt back on, and she hadn't told him to. He scratched his stubbled jaw. So, am I a prisoner or a guest? That depends, she said coolly. Will you shut up for 5 minutes? His smile lit up like he'd won a prize. That's a no. Silence stretched between them, thick with something neither of them could name. Alis hated how aware she was of the sound of his breathing, of the warmth he gave off, of the way her own cold-skinned body was slowly and possibly warming up. From being near him, I ran your scans again, she said, changing the subject like a coward. You're abnormal. I get that a lot, he replied, lying back with his hands behind his head. Let me guess. Big heart, unusual brain. Activity and weight? Don't tell me you found something else that's larger than expected? She gave him a flat look. Your reproductive organs are ... significant. He snorted. You say that like it's a medical emergency. In alar males, the equivalent tissue begins atrophy after 100 years. Yours? Are ... thriving. Well, he said, utterly pleased with himself. Some species peak early, mine ... just keeps giving. She looked away, but not fast enough to hide the smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. You're intolerable. You're not denying you ran those scans twice. Science requires verification and touch. That was for calibration. He sat up then, serious now. His voice dropped low, lower than it had been since she dragged him half dead into this cave. Look, I don't know what game this is, but I'm stuck on a planet where everything's freezing. Your people hate mine, and I've got nothing but a busted communicator and a half-melted ration pack. So, ... If you're keeping me alive just to poke and prod me like some interesting animal, fine. Just don't pretend you're not curious too. She stood up sharply, chin high. You presume too much, and you touch too much for a woman who claims she doesn't care. That shut her up. The truth was, she did care. And it terrified her. The Eilery hadn't formed emotional pair bonds in generations. Their reproduction was clinical, scheduled, and thanks to technology, barely physical. Males were kept distant. Connection was considered dangerous. Ancient, primitive, extinct. But Marcus made her want ancient things. He made her want the old ways. Touch, breath, warmth, hands exploring. Not just to examine, but to feel. And not just his body, his words, his memories. His laugh that rumbled low in his throat like distant thunder. That night, she didn't sleep. She watched him, and she wondered what it would feel like to be close to him, not as a scientist, not as a guardian, but as a woman. A female. A being made of thought and skin and want. The next morning, she brought him food. Real food. Not lab-grown synth nourishment. She'd hunted it herself, cleaned it, cooked it over the same fire he'd built with his broken hands and stubborn will. He looked at her, truly looked at her. No one's cooked for me since basic training, he said softly. I am not cooking, she snapped. Of course not, he smiled. You're just feeding the animal you found in the woods. He took a bite, moaned slightly. Okay, correction, you definitely cooked. Something warm bloomed in her chest. Not pride, something worse. Something terrifyingly close to affection. Later, they walked outside the cave. Carefully, quietly, she led him through a frozen canyon glowing with bioluminescent vines that only bloomed once every 6 years. He asked endless questions. She answered some. The rest, she ignored or lied. You people really don't do relationships, huh? Our emotions are controlled. Our bonds are cerebral. Sounds lonely. It's safe. Stop then, turning toward her in the snow. So's dying in your sleep. Doesn't make it living. She hated that he was right. Hated more that her body, her mind, her core was reacting to him like he was fire and she was something desperate to melt. That night, she stood in front of the mirror and saw her reflection differently, softer, warmer, changed, and behind her. In the firelight, he stirred again. You watching me sleep? No, she lied. You worried I'll die on you? No. Then come lie down. She turned to him, pulse pounding, and placed hadn't stirred in decades. I'm not one of your Terran females, she said, warning him. I noticed, he said, reaching for her hand. She let him. That was her next mistake, the last night she spent alone. Lady Alis had always known control. She'd been raised in the high sanctum of Ilator, where emotion was trimmed like overgrown vines, and pleasure was considered a relic of barbaric history. The body was just a vessel for the mind. Intimacy was ... administrative, clinical. Quiet, but the human was not quiet. Marcus Kane didn't move with graceful precision. He stretched like a lazy jungle cat. He yawned like he had nothing to fear. He laughed with his chest. Everything he did was too much, too loud, too alive, and she hated that she was getting used to it. The night after their hands first touched, something changed between them. Not with declarations or ceremonies, just ... closeness. He sat near her. She didn't move away. He asked more questions. She answered more honestly. His arm brushed hers when they slept. She didn't reposition. Once, his head rested on her thigh while he dozed. She didn't stop it. She memorized the way his hair felt. Rough, wild, warm. When he dreamed, he murmured in that slow, gruff Terran voice. She didn't understand the words, but she memorized. The sound was raw, vulnerable, and ... beautiful. In Ilary culture, the body wasn't something to admire, was to be ignored, mastered, outgrown. But Marcus's body didn't obey that rule, demanded to be noticed. The hard ridges of his torso, the scar that ran down his side, the absurd amount of heat he gave off. Every time he shifted, the blanket would slip off and reveal something new, something alive, something capable. He was, by every biological measure, the most impressive male specimen she'd ever encountered. Larger, stronger, more resilient. Where Ilari males wilted in the cold, Marcus thrived. She'd measured his muscle density. Twice. And not just for science. The third time. She didn't even bother with the scanner. She just used her hands. And when her fingers brushed the line where his navel led downward, he caught her wrist knot harshly, but with enough pressure that her breath caught. Careful, he said, eyes dark and voice low. Unless you're sure. I am never unsure, she whispered, even though she absolutely was. Still, she didn't pull away. His thumb stroked along the inside of her wrist, tracing the pale, pulsing vein. Then why are your hands shaking? They are not, he grinned. Lady Alis, you're trembling. She yanked her hand back. Stood, turned, but it was too late. Her temperature had spiked. Her control had cracked. And worst of all, her scent had changed. Alar females didn't emit pheromones under normal conditions. But she wasn't in normal conditions. She was in a fire-lit stone chamber with a half-naked human, whose eyes followed her like he was memorizing the shape of her body. She tried to compose herself, but her thoughts raced. He was taller than her, broader than anyone she'd known. His hands, good stars. His hands were powerful and warm, calloused in ways Alari hands never were. She found herself wondering what it would feel like if he touched her, not for medical attention, not by accident, but intentionally. Deliberately, Marcus stood slowly and walked toward her, his steps deliberate on the stone floor. He didn't try to hide the desire in his eyes. He didn't feign subtlety. "You don't want this," she said, breath shallow. He smiled. "You don't sound convinced. I don't even know if our ... parts are compatible." "Guess. There's only one way to find out," he said, voice dipped in that reckless confidence only humans seem to have. She turned sharply. "This is a mistake." "Probably," he admitted, stepping closer, "but I've made worse ones for less. Interesting women." "I am not interesting," he tilted his head. "You're brilliant, terrifying, and the most captivating thing I've ever seen that didn't explode on entry." She turned back to him, furious at the flush rising to her cheeks. "You're impossible." He smiled against lower this time, more real. "You keep saying that, but you haven't said no." And she hadn't. That night, she let him touch her, not just with hands, but with words, with presence. With human warmth that soaked into her skin like heat into frozen stone, he moved slowly, watching her for every reaction. When his fingers slipped beneath the folds of her ceremonial robe, she didn't stop him. She arched toward him. He kissed her, not oppressive lips acclaiming. His mouth was hot, hungry, but patient. She moaned a sound she didn't recognize as her own. Skin, usually cool and calm, felt alive, like it had waited lifetimes for this moment. And when she touched him, when her fingers wrapped around his size, his heat, his sheer difference, her scientific curiosity vanished. All that remained was awe. "Is that normal?" she whispered. "For a man like me?" He grinned. "Let's say you drew the long straw." "You're absurd," she gasped. "You haven't seen absurd yet." He was careful, gentle when she needed it, rough when she asked. And when they moved together, awkward at first, and then perfect, it was like the universe had never intended for her to know what she was missing, till now. When they finally collapsed into one another, tangled and breathless, Alis felt something she hadn't in centuries. Full, she studied his sleeping, form his chest rising slowly, a pulse at his throat, the slight curve of his lips. Humans weren't just resilient, they were intimate, deep, giving, and yes, superior. At least in ways the Alari had long forgotten to value that night. She didn't think about exile or punishment or her people's cold judgment. She thought only of his warmth, still clinging to her skin, and how she never wanted to feel cold again. Asterisk. The first thing Lady Alis noticed when she woke was that she was warm, not just physically but to the core. Her limbs didn't ache. Her mind wasn't buzzing with calculations. For the first time in her long, sterile life, she felt safe, and the reason was lying beside her, tangled in the same fur blanket, one powerful arm draped lazily over her waist. Marcus Kane. The reckless, half-broken Terran pilot had somehow gone from her research subject to her protector, to her lover. That last word still didn't feel real. Her people didn't use it. It's not anymore. But it echoed in her mind like a melody she never knew, she'd missed. She watched him sleep. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, each breath carrying heat that warmed even the coldest corners of her sanctuary. His face relaxed in sleep, looked impossibly young, and yet his body told the truth of a man who had fought to live. Scars, old burns, that stubborn Terran muscle mass that made Alari males look frail in comparison. She had studied alien anatomy her whole life, did nothing, and the records had prepared her for this human. Not just the size, not just the stamina, but the intensity. Last night had changed her. Not just physically, though the memory of his weight, his strength. The stretch of him inside her was still vivid in every cell of her body. But emotionally, he'd touched her, fully, soul dashed deep, and she'd let him know. Wanted him. It was terrifying. The Alari High Code forbade emotional entanglement with other species. Not just because of politics or pride, but because of biology. The old record said humans were too intense, too fast, too fierce. They burned bright, and then they vanished. Alari lived for centuries. Terrans blinked through a single lifetime like it was a sprint, but Marcus didn't feel temporary. He felt ... anchored. He stirred beside her, brow furrowing slightly. Then he opened his eyes. "You're staring," he said, voice still gravel. "And sleep." "I was calculating the surface heat distribution of your bare chest," she said flatly. He chuckled, voice rough. "Right, pure science, huh?" "Absolutely, Hum." He slid closer, pulling her into him. "Want to run another experiment?" She gasped when his lips brushed the curve of her neck. Her body responded immediately, traitorously, or traitorously. "Libido is inconvenient. Yours isn't," he whispered, nipping her ear. "It's adorable." She slapped his arm. Weakly, he laughed again, the sound so easy, so human. It made her ache, but the warmth of their stolen morning didn't last. By midday, the outer sensors flared. A proximity breach. Ayla sat bolt upright, naked under the sheets, her heart hammering in her chest. "Someone's here," she whispered. Marcus was already moving, grabbing the plasma sidearm she'd let him keep, and scanning the readout. "Who?" "Two." Didn't answer right away. Her mind raced. There were only two possible sources. Ilari enforcers, or worse, Mother. Within minutes, the shimmering field outside the sanctuary revealed a single figure tall, robed in radiating authority. Not a soldier, a high matron. Aelis's breath caught in her throat. "Stay inside," she said to Marcus, hurriedly dressing. "No chance," he replied, pulling on his shirt. "Someone's here for you because of me. I'm not hiding under a blanket like some scared little house pet." "This isn't about pride," she snapped. "You don't understand the power they wield." "I don't care who she is," he said, stepping up to her, voice low and steady. "You're not." Facing her alone, their eyes locked, and that was when she realized something new. Marcus wasn't just some random crash survivor. He wasn't a mistake or a passing thrill. He was hers now, and she was his. Together. They stepped out into the cold, hand in hand. The matron turned at the sound of their footsteps. Her face was a mirror of Eliska's, but older, harder, carved, in ice and centuries of control. "Daughter," she said, the word like a knife dipped in frost. "Matron Varel," Aelis replied, standing straighter. "I did not request counsel." "No, you never do." Her mother's gaze shifted to Marcus. "And yet you call this thing into our sacred ground." Marcus's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. Not yet. "He crash-landed," Aelis said. "I saved him. You kept him." Silence, heavy, cracking. Varel stepped closer, her eyes glowing with psychic light, focused on Marcus like she was dissecting him. "You have touched him." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "And let him touch you." "Yes," Ayla said again, this time louder. The matron's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then it is too late. The bond has already begun." Marcus frowned. "What bond?" Aelis hesitated. When Ilari engage in full physical intimacy, it triggers changes. Subtle at first. Biological. Mental. He blinked. "Like what?"
"Oh."
"You'll begin sensing me, even when I'm not there." "Okay, your dreams may align with mine." "Cool. Our heartbeats will start syncing." He grinned. "Romantic. If we separate too long, we'll both begin to deteriorate." Marcus paused. "Wait, what?" Spoke then. "You have made a soul mark, Terran. Do you understand what that means? She can no longer bond with another. Her blood sings for you now, and yours for her." Aelis looked at him, fear in her eyes, but Marcus just stepped forward. "Then, I guess I'm not leaving. You would stay here," Varel sneered. "On a cold, barren moon, surrounded by beings who will never accept you." Marcus looked at Aelis. "Where she is," he said, "is home." The matron's psychic aura rippled. Fury, shock, something deeper. "You are a danger to our people." "No," Aelis said sharply, stepping in front of him. "He's a reminder of what we forgot. Strength, passion, devotion. Flesh fades, but his doesn't, she shot back. He could outlast 3 of our men in body and will alone. The matron's face twisted. Then you've made your choice. I have. She turned. You will be exiled. Already live outside your cold rules. The matron left without another word. But the consequences of that encounter hung over them like a storm cloud. Back inside, Marcus finally exhaled. So, soul marked. Huh? Yes. And if I walk away, I'll slowly lose my mind. He blinked. Well, I've been told I leave an impression, but this is next level. She laughed, shaky but real. I'm sorry. You didn't choose this? He tilted her chin up gently. I'd choose it again. That night, they didn't make love. They held each other. Because now, it wasn't just physical, it was survival, and the beginning of something bigger than either of them could yet understand. Asterisk the days after the matron's warning passed, slowly yet intensely. The snow still fell in slow spirals over the sanctuary. But inside the stone halls, the air burned with a new heat. Alis and Marcus had crossed the line, not just touched, not just joined. They had bonded. The soul mark was now etched in both of them, invisible to the eye but impossible to ignore. Marcus noticed it first. He could feel her before she walked. Into a room, not just her footsteps, her. The weight of her presence, the rhythm of her breath. She was upset. He felt a strange pressure in the back of his skull. If she was happy, his chest felt light. Like air had changed flavor. It was like a new sense had awakened, tuned only to her and Alis. Was changing to her. Body temperature had begun to shift unnaturally. Once cold and pale, now held a faint warmth that startled even her psychic field. Once a calm ripple, now pulsed with unpredictable emotion. The bond wasn't just psychological. It was chemical, neurological, sexual. She found herself needing his proximity. With desperation, but like oxygen. The further she strayed, the more unbalanced she felt. Not weak, but hollow, like something vital had been unplugged. And Marcus, he leaned into it. He started waking before her, just to watch the way her silver hair curled slightly in sleep. He memorized the sound of her sighs, the pattern of her breathing, the curve of her hip when she stretched. Her body was aliens ofter in some places, impossibly firm in others. But she responded to him in ways that were entirely, beautifully human. One afternoon, as she meditated as closed, hands folded, he interrupted her the only way he knew. How by kissing the back of her neck, she jolted upright, shivering from the contact. You barbarian, she whispered, half scolding. He kissed her again. Say it like it's a bad thing. I am attempting a mental discipline exercise. You're already mentally disciplined. Now let's work on physical flexibility. She turned, glowering. You're insatiable. He pulled her into his lap like she weighed nothing. And you love it. She did. Their intimacy was no longer secret, not hidden. It was woven into every glance, every touch. She could think something and he'd act on it before she said a word. He'd feel her want even before she did. That was the strange part, the terrifying part. The wonderful part. But outside their sanctuary, the world was not still. Word had spread. A Terran male had soul-marked a high-born Ilari female. A scandal. A threat. A biological impossibility until now. The Matron Council. Convened without Alis, they summoned her by decree. She didn't go, so they sent someone instead. He arrived at Duskull, robed in white and violet, eyes glowing with psionic intensity. His name was Lyran Voss, first speaker of the Genetic Purity Tribunal, and he brought samples in the middle of her sanctuary. You've changed, he said, studying her with disapproval. I've evolved. Or corrupted, he sneered, setting down a crystalline tablet. It flickered to life, revealing side-by-side bioscans. One of Alis, taken only months ago, and the other now. The differences were staggering. Her bone density had increased, muscle tone enhanced, metabolic rates elevated. Even her reproductive systems, long dormant, showed signs of awakening. You are becoming Terran. Lyran said with disdain. I'm becoming whole, she said, unflinching. And what is he becoming? Lyran turned to Marcus, who had just entered the chamber, shirtless and glowing from training. His skin was flushed. His muscles flexed under the flickering light. Stronger, Marcus said casually. Smarter, hungrier. Lyran arched a perfect white brow. Marcus smirked. For her? Lyran looked physically ill. You speak of mating like a joke. Marcus stepped closer. It's not a joke. It's a connection. Something your people forgot while they were busy worshipping their own ice-cold perfection. This bond is dangerous, only to those who fear change. Lyran ignored him and turned back to Alis. The tribunal has passed judgment. Your DNA has been ... compromised. You are no longer considered pure. She said nothing. You are hereby stripped of sanctum rank and fertility rights. Still nothing. And ... Your child, if conceived, will be classified as an anomaly. It will be denied ritual inheritance. Marcus froze. Ayla stepped forward. Child. Loren blinked. You didn't tell him? Marcus's voice came like a rumble. Tell me what? Loren smiled coldly. The soul mark doesn't just fuse minds. It alters the womb. The human bond forces reproductive reactivation. She is already fertile. You are already compatible. Elise's hands trembled. Marcus turned to her, eyes searching. Is that true? She nodded once. Slowly, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he took her hand, kissed her knuckles. Well, he said softly, guess we better start thinking about baby names. Elise laughed. It came out choked, half tears, half disbelief. Lyran turned and stormed out. Marcus pulled her close. She collapsed against him, her walls finally breaking. I didn't want you to feel trapped, she whispered. Trapped? He said, Alice, I feel chosen. They stood in silence, foreheads touching. Outside, the snow swirled. Inside, something new bloomed. Not just a bond, not just love, but life. And the beginning of a future neither world could ignore. Asterisk, they didn't. Speak for a long time after Lyran left. Ayla stood at the center of the sanctuary, staring at the blank wall where the genetic scans had flickered only moments ago. The space felt smaller now, tighter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Marcus sat nearby, his elbows on his knees, hands hanging limp between them. Not afraid, not angry, just quiet. Processing, so, he said finally, voice low. And calm, we're having a kid. She turned, silver hair catching the light like starlight in motion. Possibly. The soul mark begins the shift. It doesn't always Alice. She stopped. He stood up and crossed to her in 3 strides. I'm not scared. You should be. I'm not. You don't understand what this means, she whispered, eyes wild with fear. They won't just exile me. They'll hunt me. They'll sterilize me. They'll take what's inside me and call it an infection. You'll be declared an evolutionary threat. I don't care. I do. Her voice cracked. Because if I lose you, I won't just grieve. Break. That's what the soul mark does. It isn't romantic, Marcus. It's biological dependence. We've fused. If we're separated for too long, we'll both spiral. It's like trying to live without your own nervous system. Marcus didn't flinch, took her face in his hands, thumbs brushing the edges of her jaw. I'd rather burn with you, he said softly, than live cold without you. Her eyes shimmered not with psionic light, but with very real, very human tears. That night, they made love like it might be their last. It wasn't soft, it was desperate, fierce, claiming, the kind of connection that ignored time. Species rules. The kind of heat that melted the icy laws of generations in one long, breathless night, and afterward, as they lay entangled on the sanctuary floor, naked, exhausted, and Elevalis whispered the words she had never said before. I love you. Didn't hesitate. Yeah, he said, pulling her close. Me too. Wild, huh? But the wild was catching up to them. 2 days later, The outer perimeter alarms howled for the first time in a century. Not just one ship, an entire Alari Tribunal, flotilla, stealth class, weapons powered. They weren't coming to talk there. "Here for me," Ayla said grimly, sliding into her armored travel robe. Marcus was already suiting up. The survival armor was tight across his chest, built for high-speed atmospheric drop missions. But his pulse was calm, steady, focused. "Then, we don't stay. You can't outrun Elar warbirds," she said, her voice tight. "I don't need to outrun them. I just need to outthink them." "You're not suggesting I have one asset they don't," Marcus said, fastening the last seal on. His wrist plate. A genius scientist with silver hair, illegal technology, and a fully awakened psychic bond that links her to a man who won't let her die. She tried to smile, failed. "You sound ridiculous." "I know," he said, kissing her forehead. "Let's do something even worse." They didn't have a proper ship, just the battered Terran escape pod he'd crash-landed in, now retrofitted. With Ilary power cells and ... A few borrowed cloaking mods Alis had acquired years ago during her rogue research. It wasn't fast, but it was invisible. Mostly they launched just before dawn, slipping through the blizzard like ghosts. Below, the Tribunal landed in 4 Sate shuttles. 50 enforcers, scanners humming, eyes glowing. But they were already gone the moment they breached upper orbit. Marcus set course for neutral space, a narrow band between Terran and Alary. Territory filled with old war debris, rogue moons, and silence. "You sure this is safe?" he asked, gripping the controls. "No," Ayla said, strapping into the co-pilot seat. "But I'd rather raise a child in a scrap field than inside a cage." He glanced at her. "You're sure?" She turned to him, placing his hand on her stomach. "No Alari child has been born naturally in over 4 centuries, she said. "But I feel it. Something new. Something ... hybrid. The bond activated more than just our connection." Marcus swallowed. "And if it's real, then this child is the future of both species." They sat in silence, the stars crawling past. Then the pod jolted. "Proximity alert," Marcus muttered. "We've got another contact. 200. Clicks out, tailing us." "Not Alari," Ayla said, narrowing her eyes. "Too slow. Energy signatures mismatched." "Pirates worse." She tapped the screen. A new symbol flared across the display. "The Veil Consortium." Marcus exhaled. "Great. Galactic scavengers with too many ships and not enough rules." Alis was already rerouting power. "Want you? Terran biology is worth a fortune on the black market. And what about you?" She looked at him. "I'm bonded to a Terran carrying a half-Alari hybrid. What do you think?" It didn't wait for boarding. Marcus spun the pod, dropping into a dead zone between 2 ice moons, using gravity slings to slingshot through asteroid debris. Alis rerouted the cloaking power to short-range distortions, flickering their signal like a strobe. "Think we lost them?" Marcus said after several tense minutes. "No," she whispered, scanning the telemetry. Behind them, a massive cruiser emerged, black as space, wide as a city. Alis turned to him. "We're not going to make it to Terran space." "We don't have to," Marcus said slowly. "We just need to make it to Laren Station." Her eyes widened. "That place is outlawed. Criminals, smugglers." "Exactly," Marcus said, punching the coordinates. "It's also outside Alari and Terran jurisdiction. And nobody there gives a damn about purity councils." Alis stared at him. "You're insane." Maybe he grinned. "But you're insane." As the pod screamed toward the outlaw station, pursued by enemies from both sides of the war, Alis reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined. "Marcus." "Yeah, if we survive this, we will. And the child is born healthy. It will be. We'll have to name it something bold." He grinned wider. "You thinking Terran or Alari?" "I was thinking both." Pod disappeared into the misty rings of Laren Station, a tiny flicker of heat in a cold, lawless sky. Behind them, war brews. Ahead, the unknown. But between them, heat, life, something worth burning. Everything for love, family, a future that wasn't supposed to exist, and now might change the stars. Laran Station was a city that had given up on civilization and never looked back, floating in the shadows of a dead star. It was a maze of scavenged holes, pressurized domes, flickering neon lights, and no law, but profit. Here, old war criminals walked beside arms dealers. Exiled nobles drank beside gene smugglers. Nobody asked questions unless they came with a price. Perfect. Marcus guided the pod toward docks. Savannah, grimy landing bay hanging half loose from the station's underbelly. The ship creaked as it settled onto the rust-colored pad, hissed once, and went silent inside the cockpit. Ayla sat with her hand on her stomach. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Marcus could feel it, through the bond, the pulse beneath her skin. The rhythm wasn't just hers, anymore it was theirs. The child was alive, fully and growing faster than any Ilari embryo on record. And so were the risks. We can't stay long, Ayla said, unstrapping. We need supplies. Fuel. Medical grade. Nutrient packs. Marcus nodded. And information. If the tribunal follows us here, we need an extraction route. They stepped out into the heat haze of Laran Station, sticking close. It wasn't just habit anymore. It was instinct. Their bond wasn't just psychic, it was gravitational. Farther apart they stood, the heavier the air felt. Their first stop was a Terran black market clinic, tucked behind a noodle stall run by an 8-limbed Glavari chef. The doctor was a retired Navy medic named Kit Danvers, guard bitter, good with needles. She scanned Ayla once, then scanned her again, then cursed under her breath. This isn't just cross-species gestation, Kit muttered. It's rewriting her genome in real time. Her marrow is shifting. Her bones are ... adapting. Ayla lay still on the med table, expression unreadable. Kit turned to Marcus. You're the father. Yeah, he said, jaw tight. Then you should know this kid isn't going to be Terran or Ilari. It's going to be something new. Something no one's seen before. You got enemies, soldier? Plenty, Good Kit said, handing him a vibra pistol. You're gonna need this. They hid in the lower levels of the station for days. Marcus traded labor for favors. Stayed hidden, working in shadows, repurposing stolen Ilari tech, mapping energy flows, building a cradle from materials meant for war. In those quiet hours, she whispered to the child growing inside her. A strange blend of ancient chants and Terran lullabies Marcus taught her, and at night, when the lights dimmed and the station groaned like a sleeping beast, she curled into Marcus, wrapped in his arms. Their foreheads pressed together as if afraid. Even dreams might pry them apart. One night her breathing changed. She gripped his wrist. It's starting. Marcus didn't hesitate. Kit was called. Makeshift medbay lit up. Machines screamed warnings. Aless writhed in pain that cracked the walls of her centuries of control. No Ilari has done this naturally in generations. Kit muttered, sweat. Pouring her system isn't built for this anymore. She's not just Ilari anymore, Marcus growled. She's more. The labor lasted hours. Marcus never left her side. She screamed once, just once. It shattered a light fixture then. Silence, followed by a cry. Small, new, loud, human lungs. Ilari lungs. Something other. Kit held up the child, pale skin with veins that shimmered faint blue. Eyes already open, one silver, one sky blue. 10 fingers, 10 toes. Glowing faintly in the low light like starlight trapped in flesh. Marcus stared, his breath caught. Is that ... Normal? He whispered. Nothing about this is normal, Kit said, grinning. Ayla reached out, weak but smiling. Her arms trembled as Marcus placed the child in her embrace. She wept silently, not with grief. With awe. He's perfect, she whispered. He's the bridge. Marcus knelt beside her, touching the child's soft hand, the little fingers curled. Instantly around his thumb, the bond leapt from mother and father to child. Warmth, peace, a weightless pressure that filled the air like gravity. Finding a new center, and then the cum crackled. Unregistered cums pinged the outer grid. Ilari, encryption. They found us, Kit said grimly. Marcus stood. His body was exhausted. His heart wasn't. They won't take her, he said. Or him. But Alis didn't look afraid. She looked ready. We don't run, she said. We show them. Minutes later, Marcus and Alis stood at Dock 7's edge, baby in her arms. Wind from the lower vents whipping around them like the beginning of a storm. The Ilari shuttle hovered above Sleek, blowing. Sharp as a blade, it landed. The ramp lowered, but no soldiers emerged. Only one, Matron Varel, her face unreadable. Her stride slow. She stopped 5 feet from them. You birthed the impossible, she said softly. And in doing so, you have shattered the Council's fear. Alis said nothing. Do you know what this child is? The matron asked. A beginning, Alis replied. No, Varel said. A choice. She looked at Marcus. At any other time, I would have had you killed. But now, I look at that child, and I see a future I never imagined. A pause then. Slowly she knelt. Not to Iwayas. To the child, your son, she said, will not be hunted. He will be watched. When he comes of age, the galaxy will already know his name. She stood, gave a curt nod. The shuttle rose and vanished. Marcus turned to Alis, stunned. You think she means it? No, she said, gently rocking the child. But it doesn't matter. He's not theirs. He's ours. And together, they turned back toward the station. Not fugitives. Not lovers in hiding, but parents, partners, pioneers. That night, Marcus stood at the viewport, holding his son against his chest. Elise joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. The stars stretched out forever, and for once, they didn't seem cold. Do you ever wonder, she asked quietly, what we would have done if you hadn't crashed into my sanctuary? He smiled. Probably would have lived boring lives, died cold. She laughed softly, and now he looked at her. Then at their son now, he whispered, we burn, double quotes together, forever.